So, welcome back, everyone. It's nice to be back, to be learning again together, and to try and understand halacha on a little bit of a deeper level. So, if you remember, the whole purpose of what we're trying to do is sometimes we know the halacha, but what we're really trying to do is just to get a little bit of a deeper understanding of what it's all about. So, I want to share my screen with you to go through our the PowerPoint that I put together. And if you remember, if you remember what we did last time is that we can everybody see that the PowerPoint on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. What we did is that the last time we went through what I said were the 5 M's. So there's mafshit, removing the skin, me'abed, curing the hide. It's all about skins, but we learned quite a lot out of that. We learned about brushing teeth. We learned about what we if we can use certain creams or not creams, depending on the viscosity, etc., etc. What I want to look at now is to go to these last 2 things, mesartet and mechatech, which we're going to look at now and try and just get that depth understanding, and then we finish these, and then we'll go to the rest. So just excuse me as I get to that place where we are up to. If anybody wants these sheets, that were on the thing. Okay, so mesartet is preparing, scoring, making lines. We'll understand what that means. And mechatech is specifically cutting on a measured line. Let's see how that practically manifests and gives us help. Okay, so just to recap, we said first the hide is tanned, then it's smoothed into a workable item using all the different chemicals, and now we got all the other stuff. Then it needs to be cut into its most desired shape. So in order to get into its desired shape, remember it's a hide. It's a rare thing. You can't just use it, and if you make a mistake, throw it out. So therefore, what the artisan would do, it would make lines on the hide, and once the lines were made, then they would cut it. So the cutting is done on the line, and the line is made. And so both of those things become the 2 malachas. The first one is mesartet. So to ensure that everything was exactly accurate as they needed to, they drew lines on the leather. I'm not sure you've seen it, but gentlemen, when you go get an aliyah, you see that there's that sirtut in the Torah. You can see they're like little lines that are like engraved in a way into the Torah itself, into the parchment. That's called sirtut. It's the same mesartet. It's the same word. The whole purpose there is to make sure that you write on a straight line. It's the same thing here. They're creating these lines on the leather, and one has to be careful. Now, there's very few real practical things in our world today that we have that. So what I'm going to move on is into the next one, which is mechatech. Now you've got the lines. Now what you do is you've got to cut it to size. So the concept of mechatech is cutting or ripping whatever it is, and this is a very important part, in a precise manner to make the item suitable for use. You hear that? It's not just cutting because or ripping, because there's another malacha called korea, which is tearing. That's not what this is. This is tearing is just tearing. This is tearing it according to a specific thing. So for example, as an example of the of mesartet would be, let's say a person takes a piece of paper and folds it up in half in order to get that line to ensure that when they do actually tear it in half, that it's absolutely straight. That's mesartet. That's why it's like very impractical. Not many people are going to do that. Just start like folding paper to tear it, even if they do tear it or don't tear it on Shabbos. But that's the concept. Now we're talking about taking that precise line or that precise space and cutting it to make it suitable for use. Okay, so let's look at what is included in this malacha. So, for example, you cut out a picture. If you have a picture on a piece of paper and you cut it out or you tear it out so that you actually get the formation of that picture, then that's a malacha. That's the malacha. Or you rip a paper, as we said, along its fold. And even if you cut material in an even straight line with scissors, so that's concluded in the malacha. But food is not included in this. And so therefore, obviously, you can cut food in a specific size and shape. You don't have to worry about food. Now, why is that? So the Shulchan Aruch says Again, I'm sorry it's in Hebrew, but let's go through it. The Shulchan Aruch says, Ochlei Bahima, that when it comes to food of animals, Ein Bahem Mishun Tikkun Kli. You don't have to, there's no worry about the fact that you're going to have a certain amount or certain type of food for animals. And this is animals, of what's called Tikkun Kli. Tikkun Kli is where you take the thing that you've got and you fix it so that it can be used. So now you've got this animal fodder and you cut it into certain sizes in order to give the animal its food. So he says we don't have to worry about that. Therefore, mutar liktom afilu b'sakin. Therefore, you can cut even with a knife, kash or tevin. In other words, you can do it in the normal way that you would normally cut. Kash, hay or tevin or some type of produce. And you can even use it to what's it called, to pick your teeth, because you can. Comes along the Mishnah Berurah, afilu b'sakin. The Mishnah Berurah says even with a knife, v'afilu hu machpid ala midan. This is the important part for our machatech. Even if you're very absolutely strict on the size of it, remember, machatech is cutting something to a specific size. Even if you're strict on the size, ein bazeh shum chadash. There is no worry at all. Isur, why of it being prohibition? Why? Machmas machatech kaven the davar ochel hu. You don't have to worry about machatech, about us cutting it into a certain specific size, because it's a davar ochel. It's something that one can eat, and something that one eats, we don't have to worry at all about machatech. So what do we have to worry about with machatech? So let's just go through a few things that I'm bringing in as examples. So Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said that, for example, if you take a sugar packet, okay, and you rip it along its dotted line, right? So that would seem to be machatech, because you're ripping it along a specific line. But he says, no, you don't have to worry about it. Why? Because the purpose is not to tear the packet in an even specific way, but rather the purpose is that you don't want the sugar to all spill out. So you're not doing it for the packet, you're doing it for the sugar, okay? So obviously there are some authorities that say it's not okay, but I think Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach is quite a good authority. I mean, he was the Gadol Ador. They're always going to be, and this is what we've spoken about before, there are always going to be strictures, because that's the nature of halacha, that some people want to be more strict than others. That's always going to happen. What we have to look at is the way is, what can we do in the appropriate way, not to find heterim, but to find the way of keeping halacha in the right way. Okay, so now this is an important part. This I got from Chabad.org, and he says here, and very important, machatech is different from the other malachas, right? It's generally forbidden to cause a malacha to be done, even if you don't intend for it to happen. So, for example, you can't wash your hands over grass, right? Because then it's watering grass, and that's a whole different malacha. So even though a person has no intention of watering the grass, you're still not allowed to do it. But machatech is different, because it's cutting something in a precise manner to make it usable. If you don't care whether the item is precise or not, it doesn't fall into the category of machatech. Where do we get that from? This is from the Rambam. The Rambam says very simply, if a person cuts hide, an amount of leather, in order to make a kameh. Now, kameh is like those little things in that Sephardi world. Ashkenazim don't really know about kamehs. We try and live in this rational world, which is for good and bad. But we don't, these little like amulets that they wear around their necks and things like that. It's got stuff in it. So if you cut a piece of leather for the size of a kameh, you chayav, because you wanted it that size. But where does it depend on? That's where you want a specific length and a specific breadth, and you cut with the intention that is how much you want. Then it falls into the malacha. Aval, however, im chatach derech hefsed or below kavana. But if you cut in like you're just like cutting away, without any kavana lemidato, and you don't really care how big it's or small it's going to be, you're just cutting along, or kamasachek hareze pater, then you pater. You're not allowed to do it midrabanan, but from the law of the strict law midoraita, you don't have to worry about it. You're pater, and that's something fundamental for us to understand in this machatech. It's the only one where you have to have specific kavanah to do it, and it's only when you have the specific kavanah to do it that you become chayav, that you become obligated. And then he goes through other things that I'm going to leave it for the moment. Okay, so what we've said here is that intent is the integral factor. If you're tearing something on Shabbos and it happened to get torn in a specific shape, then that's not the malacha of mechatech. It might be the malacha of korea, but it's not the malacha of mechatech. Just trying to get to, we've got to just define the malachas. So, for example, if you have like one of those, you've got those containers where you've got that little strip that you're going to take off. Now, to take it off, you're not trying to take it off in a measured way. You're just trying to get this thing off. So it's not the malacha of machatek. Is it a malacha of korea or matake and kli or a whole bunch of other malachas? That's a different conversation, and we can have that conversation when we get to that malacha. But I want to focus specifically on the malacha of machatek. Okay. Now, what happens when you've got the specific shape already prepared? And what we do is that we just finish the job by removing or tearing something to get to that thing. So the simple example is a box of tissues. Okay, so you've got a box of tissues, right? There's that perforated line on the box of tissues, which you're going to, I don't know, everyone's got their own way of opening a box of tissues. You push it around, however you do it. But you're opening the box of tissues and you push that perforation in, and then out comes the tissues, and it's wonderful. So that is a problem, as you can understand, because you've got a specific space or a specific shape that you have now created. That would fall into the din of machateh. Okay. What about rubbish bags? So this is obviously a very important one. At home, you've got a rubbish, tissues. I will have to understand how you can open a box of tissues. We'll get to now. But you got rubbish bags. So you got all these rubbish bags. You had so much rubbish that you in the bin, and now you take the bag. Remember, you can't tie up a double knot. You take the bag, you tie a single knot, you get rid of the bag. Now you want to get another rubbish bag. The problem is that it's in that roll, like here. And the roll is a roll of perforated plastic rubbish bags. Okay? Can you tear the perforation on Shabbos? So the answer to that is a very simple no. You can't tear the perforation on because that is the absolute machatech. You wanted a specific amount, and you're tearing it a specific amount along a specific line, and it's very clearly that is machatech. Okay, so please, if you what we do is that we've got like kind of plastic bags that are folded, and then there's big rolls. So you got a few little ones that are folded, and the big rolls for normal the week, but the folded ones are for Shabbos in case we need them. Okay.
Can I quickly ask two questions?
Of course.
With the tissues, yes. Often the tissues are connected.
Tearing them off. That could be a problem. That could be a problem, depending on how they connect.
Sorry?
Depending on how they're connected. If they're connected,
right at the bottom, you can pull them, right?
Yeah. So sorry, Lance, say again.
And then with the rubbish bags, could you not just, and some of the tissue, you just pull randomly with intention to break, but not necessarily to pull along the perforated line. It may just happen to break on the perforated line. It will, but you're not breaking it by the perforated line. But just pulling.
The tissues are easier to use that little trick, but nobody wants half a plastic bag. You
might lose a plastic bag, but you might get it off.
No, but your whole purpose is to get that on the perforation. I mean that's what we do, Lon. Maybe it's a different way. No, you know what I mean. You can't pull the whole trick on that. I don't think that's going to be available to use in that way. Okay. But the tissues we're going to see, because the tissues will fall into the thing of toilet paper similarly as well. We're going to get to that now. Okay. So this conversation really came about because of the toilet paper issue, right? Can you use toilet paper? Can't use it? I remember, coming from King David and from like quite a traditional home, but wasn't the frummest of homes. And I remember going to my first B'nai Akiva, what was it called, seminar in Delmos on the rocks. I don't know if anybody ever remembers going to any of those seminars. And I went into a room and I saw David Tariki, who's now lives in Eretz Yisrael, with this massive knife and busy cutting toilet paper. And I didn't know what he was doing. And I was a bit like, I thought he had lost his mind. But then when I went to go and speak to a friend of mine who came from a school that kind of knew more things, so explained to me, because we don't tear toilet paper on Shabbos. So the question is, why not? What's the issue of the tearing of toilet paper? And there are a number of issues, and that's what we need to try and get to a little bit of depth in, so that we can kind of unpack it and really get to understand what it's all about, because that just makes our Shabbos a little bit more meaningful. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch says, "Ein shovrim acheres," that you can't break kind of ceramics. Ve'ein korin aniyar, and you can't break and you can't tear paper. Why? Because when you do it and you tear it or you break it, then what it is, it's called mataken kli. Mataken kli, we saw that right at the beginning, is fixing up a vessel for its use. So you can't tear cheres, and you can't break cheres, some type of ceramics of sort. In the old days, they sometimes use that to clean themselves. Excuse me, it's going to be quite graphic in some of the things we're talking about in the toilet. And you can't tear the paper, because the reason you're doing it is to have a vessel of sorts in order to clean yourself. So the Mishnah Berurah on that says, right, because it says because it's mataken kli. Umayri says we're talking about b'she'ein makpid alamida. Says that's when you don't worry about how big or small it's going to be. Because if you care about how much you're taking, if you've got a specific measurement, so then you've got an issue of machatech. We've learned that. Ve'im korea niyar lekraim kedei lekaneach et atzmo bahen or leshaer eze tashmish chayav mishum korea. Says, and if you start tearing up paper, either because you need to clean yourself, or because you want something else, that's considered to be tearing. Korea al manat letaken. It's tearing in order to fix it, because by virtue of the fact that you're tearing it, you can now use it in a way that you wanted to use it. And then he says that's the case of Agudah Katuv. In the Agudah is one of the halachic works. Sheyamer la'ena Yehudi. You should say, if you don't have toilet paper, you don't have already cut paper, what do? You should say la'ena Yehudi, to a non-Jew, Eini yachol likroto kol ze she'ein patuach. He says, like, I can't use it because it's it's all wrapped up. So ve'im yavin, and if he understands, Eini Yehudi, the non-Jew, me'atzmo v'yiftachenu litein le'islan bada. If the non-Jew says, oh, I get it, you can't. I mean, I don't know how they would ever get this, right? That you can't use toilet paper. It's quite a crazy thing. But that's the case. So if we can get it out of some type of roundabout hint, then the non-Jew can tear it for you. Okay, so that's great. We got a bit of we're in a bit of trouble. So can one tear the toilet paper on Shabbos at the end of the day? So it would seem to be tearing toilet paper or paper towels. So it is paper towels as well, and that's an important one. Paper towels are there to clean up the mess in the kitchen. You can't tear the paper towels for the same reason you can't tear the toilet paper. It seems classic. However, Rav Shlomo Zalman again says that tearing toilet paper is not machatech, right? It's not the melacha of machatech. Rather, it's not the melacha of machatech, because you don't want a specific size of it. You're just doing it because that's where it's perforated. The problem is that when you do it, what do we do? Like we just saw, is that you're tearing it off. You're fashioning something new, and you're making it into something usable. Because previously it's part of this big long roll, and you couldn't use it. And now that it's disconnected, so it serves its intended function. It's such a big and important part of things that we often forget that part of the Shabbos experience as one of the malachas is what's called makeh b'patish. Makeh b'patish is the final blow in the with a hammer in the creation of something. And in this case, it falls out that when you tear that toilet paper, you're actually making the final blow in the usage of the toilet paper. So that's a malach in and of itself. So what should you do? Because we all need the toilet paper. Let me just add in another thing. We have to be, so ideally you just cut the toilet paper for Shabbos, or use tissues that are dispensed one by one, because I learned this goes to your point now, the tissues that are connected to one another is exactly the same. The minute you disconnect it from the one before it, you are what? You're mataka in the kli. You're fixing the tissue to be used for itself. Whether it's blowing your nose or wiping your children's tears or anything like that, it's the same thing. We can see that there is absolute, at this point in time, no heter for toilet for roller towel. That's for sure. What about toilet paper? In fact, there is quite a very clear view that a roll of toilet paper is muktzah on Shabbos, which is quite something. And you can't use it and you can't move it unless you have no alternative. So now, if you have no alternative, is there a way of doing this? So let's go. Where could it possibly come from? We've got all these things. You've got malachas. We've got malacha of machatet. You've got a malacha of mataka and kli. You've got all these malachas, and all of a sudden you're saying, well, if there's no alternative, so maybe you can use it. So where's that from? So that comes from a Gemara in Brochas. The Gemara in Brochas says the following: Gadol kavod abriyot shedoiche lo ta'aseh shebatorah. That human dignity is so great, and our concern about human dignity is so great that it can even override a prohibition in the Torah. This manifests itself in a number of places. I'll just tell you one of the things. I forgot to put this story in, but Rav Soloveitchik was once at a shul, and the guy was laning, and his laning wasn't very good. So you know how it is with laning. When guys are laning and the guy's not so good, like this is everybody's opportunity to show how brilliant their laning is. So the guy will say, Vayav, Vayavi, and everyone's going, Vayavo, who and he, and all, everyone's screaming and shouting. So Soloveitchik stopped them. And it was clear that this guy was really like getting offended by the fact that everybody was stopping him. He wasn't used to it. It could be like in those small towns that nobody knows until you get people coming to visit. Okay, so he stopped them and he said to them, no, stop. You can't correct him anymore. Because the way he lanes is perfect. It's fine. This is Rav Soloveitchik. Imagine, the guy's laning terribly. And he says he's laning fine. So afterwards, his Talmidim went up to him and said to him, Rabbi, we don't understand. You've got, here's this guy's laning. Every second word is wrong. And you said it's fine. We must just carry on and we mustn't stop him. We don't understand. You've always taught us that the laning's got to be perfect. And by the briskers especially, it's perfect. It's perfect in the words. It's perfect in the trop. It's perfect in the enunciation. And if it's not perfect, you go back. It's really a big thing. So he said, because the reading of the Torah is a din d'Rabbanan. It's a rabbinic law. And since it's a rabbinic law, it's something that we have to make sure that it doesn't contradict other laws. But the law of kavod habriyos, of a person's honor, of a person's self-worth, which is what was being destroyed every time everybody made the screams out and the guy made a mistake, right? That was being destroyed. And since it was being destroyed, said Rav Soloveitchik, his dignity, his kavod habriyos is far more important if it can be doiche, if it can push aside a Torah prohibition, how much more so it can push aside a rabbinic issue. And that's something that, once I heard that, it's a big thing. It's easy to do in when you're doing Torah reading. It's not so easy in other things. Sometimes human dignity does sometimes get pushed aside, but it's clear that Chazal wanted us to understand that human dignity is a fundamental. And it's a fundamental to the fact that even though we've got malachas that you might be over on, since human dignity is there, it comes to play. So one of the places where it does is mentioned in the Gemara, specifically in this case, is let's say a person is walking around and someone says to him, "Oh, I see you've got those lovely new trousers," right? The guy says, "Yes, yeah, no, I bought them from I don't know where Zara." Okay, for want of a better word. So the guy says, "Oh, no, it's amazing. I hope you had them checked for shatnez." So the guy says, "What do you mean shatnez?" He says, "No, shatnez, the mixture of the wool and linen." He said, "Yeah, but it's a pair of pants." He says, "Yeah, but everybody knows that those pants have got shatnez in them." So now what does the guy do? Does the guy pull off his pants in the middle of the street and run around in his excuse me, Gainor and any other ladies out here, run around in his undies, right? Because it's shatnez, or is that kavod habriyos? You can cover the so it's doiche. So that's the question that the Gemara is discussing, and that's where we see God will cover the that kavod habriyos is fundamental. and we have to be careful about it. And it's in every environment. And as I said, sometimes easier, sometimes less easy, but it's something just to be aware of. And it manifests itself in Siman, in Siman 312 in the Shulchan Aruch, where the Torah says that, which is specifically, it's unbelievable. There's a specific Siman, specific section of Halakha, which is Hanitzrach lenakavav, a person who needs to go to the bathroom. How should they clean themselves? It's unbelievable. Uvo Yutzifim, and in it there are 10 different sections. So it's a section with a subsection of 10, all about how one should clean oneself on Shabbos, what one should do, which is quite an amazing thing when you think about it. I mean, how often do we think about those things on Shabbos? But comes along, the beginning of it says, Mishum kavod habriot, because of the kavod habriot, because of this honor of dignity. Heitir lataltel avanim la'alosam l'kanech, afilu lagag imo, dehavetircha yasera muta. Says that because of kavod habriot, in the old days they used to use stones. Okay, just no one complain about the sandpaper anymore, right? In the old days they used to use stones. Okay, and they used to use stones, but a stone we know is what? Is muktzah. So how can you pick up a stone, okay, to clean yourself? It's muktzah. And it's muktzah machmas gufa. It's the highest level of muktzah in itself. So if that's the case, so Chazal, the Torah says, the Chazal explain that for kavod habrios you can pick up the stones and you can carry them up, even if they're heavy, up to the roof, which is tircha yaseir. It's a lot of effort because of kavod habrios. And so therefore, when there's no other option, you can tear toilet paper. But how do you do it? So you shouldn't do it on the perforated line because that's machatech, possibly. You should do it in a way that's a shinui from the way you normally tear it. Okay, why? Because that's there to preserve the human dignity. And by the way, that's not a generalization. It's specifically in this case. Now, what do we do? So this is like interesting. I'm sorry to be so, I don't know if it's graphic, but it's just got to be what it is. Okay, so what do we do? So if there's no pre-cut toilet paper available, what do you do? So ideally, it's kind of an interesting idea. One should take the toilet roll and just use it directly without tearing it, and then you drop it in the toilet and you flush, and the flushing will break it down. Okay. The problem is it's not very practical unless you live on your own and you're a hermit and no one ever goes to your bathroom as well on Shabbos, because if they do, it's a bit grim. And if that's the case, there's got to be a better way of doing it. Okay. So then if you do it with a shinui, you can bring your cat in and they can tear the toilet paper for you, or do it between the perforated lines rather than along them. Okay. Obviously, we can't do it to a specific length, because the minute you do it to a specific length, then it falls into the getter, into the realm of the smachatech, and do it in a totally irregular manner, either with your fists, your fingers, whatever it is, things that you don't normally do it in that way. And in that way, it becomes a means of being able to do it. Okay. So what I want to just discuss is that what happens if you do have a box of tissues. Okay, you do have a box of tissues. It's just not open. So now what do? Can you open the box of tissues? Well, we said you can't, because that's machatech if you're going to cut along that perforation. So the way to do it would be to open the box of tissues in a way that you don't normally open it. So be it like on the side where you destroy the box. So because if you don't destroy the box, right, then what have you done? You'd be matak and kli. You've opened the tissue box and you've made it into the tissue box that it's supposed to be. So if one has the tissues but the box is not open it up on the sides, and thereby you destroy the box. You don't use the specific tearing there to do it. That's machatech, and then the world is your oyster, and you can enjoy yourself and not have to worry about these very difficult malachas in your ablutions, for want of a better word. So I wanted to finish on that. I think it's a malacha that we know about, but I wanted to go into it. I wanted you to understand it a little bit more. And then next week, please God, we'll start going into some more different practical cases. If there are any like specific situations that you're thinking of and you're not sure of, please let me know, because then what I'll do is that I'll use those as the basis to explain the different malachas that we're going to be dealing with. Okay. Okay, great, guys. Let's stop there and have a good night. Ezrat Hashem, we'll continue next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rav. Shkach.
Well,
Thank you, Rabbi.